Hey, I'm Nathan. Before we start, I want you to hold one idea in your head, because the whole story turns on it. Cold is a record keeper. A warm room forgets everything. A cold one keeps receipts. Skin remembers being frozen, and it remembers in layers, like rings in a tree. Machines that make cold remember too, because every time you open the lid, the motor has to work harder to win the heat back, and that extra work gets written down somewhere whether anybody meant to write it or not. Today's story is about a father who knew that better than almost anyone alive, and about the people who bet everything on him never coming home to read it. He was 40 kilometers past the last friendly position, in a jungle where the radio barely worked, when a stranger's voice told him what had been happening in his own garage. And here's the part that still gets me. By the time he heard it, the United States government had already declared him dead. On paper, he had been a memory for 9 days. Most men would have screamed until somebody fixed the file. He did the opposite. He read the paperwork, he did the math, and he decided to stay dead a little longer, because a dead man is the only witness nobody bothers to lie carefully around. Stick with me. This one is about patience, about believing a child when she gives you numbers instead of feelings, and about the strange mercy of a machine that never learned how to keep a secret. Wilbur Marsden ran a meat locker behind a hardware store in Tully Bend, Florida, for 31 years, and he taught his son almost everything worth knowing inside a room that stayed at 28 degrees. Chase Marsden was 9 years old the first time his father showed him what cold could prove. A man came in claiming Wilbur had let 140 pounds of venison spoil. Wilbur did not argue. He cut into the top package and showed him the ice. See how it's crystal, all through, like sugar? That's meat that froze once and stayed froze. Meat that thaws and freezes again grows different ice. Big and wet and gray, in sheets. He wiped his knife on his apron. Your meat's been out of a freezer and back in it. Wasn't mine. The man left. Chase stood in the doorway with cold coming off the shelves onto his shins and asked how his father knew that. Because cold keeps time, Wilbur said. Warm rooms forget. But everything that happens to a cold thing leaves a mark in it, and the marks stack up in order. You just have to be willing to read them. That sentence became the spine of a life. Chase went into the Army at 19 and found out fast that he had a specific kind of mind. He could hold numbers still while everything around him moved. He tested into Special Forces at 23 and picked the hardest lane available, the medical sergeant course. 18 months of anatomy and surgical improvisation for men who would practice medicine in places with no hospital and no clock. By 31, he was on a team in 7th Group, whose whole professional life is Latin America, which meant Spanish in his ear and jungle in his boots for 2 decades. Cold injury became his specialty inside a specialty. He wrote a 2-page sheet on recognizing non-freezing cold injury that got copied until it hung in aid stations that had never heard his name. He could look at a fingertip and tell you roughly how long ago the tissue had been hurt, because the body heals cold damage on a schedule, in stages, and the stages do not skip. He met Jolene Ostrowski at a boat ramp when he was 28 and home on leave. She had grown up 2 counties over, in a family that measured people by what they had, and she had learned early that the fastest way out of a small life was to attach yourself to somebody going somewhere. She thought a Green Beret was going somewhere. She just had a different destination in mind than he did. They married in a rented hall with 60 folding chairs. For a few years it worked, on reunions and long-distance calls. Then it stopped being enough for her. She wanted a bigger house than a master sergeant's pay allowed. She started saying the word deployment, the way other people say the word audit. Ruby was born when Chase was 33, and Ruby fixed nothing between them, but Ruby fixed something in him. She came out of the gate counting. She counted the boards on the porch, the seconds between lightning and thunder, the number of times the ice maker dumped in a night. When she was 4, she informed her father that the drive to her grandmother's house was 206 mailboxes. She kept a composition notebook with a rubber band around it and wrote numbers in it that only made sense to her. Chase understood her completely. He bought her a stopwatch for her 6th birthday and she cried, in the good way. In the garage there was a chest freezer, a big white one with a bad hinge, holding every deer Chase had ever taken. In the summer of Ruby's 5th year, it started tripping the garage breaker, which was on the same circuit as the well pump, which meant that when it tripped, the house lost water. Chase fixed it the way he fixed most things, by measuring first. He bought a clamp-style energy monitor, a cheap gray box with a screen and a slot for a memory card, and clamped it on the garage circuit so he could see exactly what the freezer was drawing and when. Then he replaced the start relay, the tripping stopped, and he forgot the monitor existed. It stayed on the wall behind the water heater for 3 years, blinking its little green light, sampling the garage circuit every 10 seconds, writing every number to a memory card nobody was ever going to look at. Remember that box. Everything comes back to that box. In February, he left on his 6th deployment, a 6-month advisory rotation into the Darién, that stretch of jungle where Panama stops pretending it has roads and Colombia begins. The work was long walk work. Assess, advise, move, repeat. In triple canopy, where a helicopter is a rumor and the radio is a religion. The forward site was a cleared patch with 3 hardened tents and a generator, and the team called it Site Ember. Beyond it, there was nothing anybody would call friendly for a very long way. The night everything changed, Chase was 40 kilometers out with 4 other men, sitting in mud, at 4 in the morning. Captain Drew Nightingale had the map. Kyle Morales had the belt fed and an opinion about everything. Scott Hollander, the engineer, was asleep sitting up with his chin on his chest, which was a skill, and Logan Pelletier, the communications sergeant, was fighting a satellite that did not want to be found because the canopy over them was 90 feet thick and wet. They were doing a route assessment on a river crossing the partner unit could not use, and they were 2 days into a 5-day loop. Chase had a fever of 99.4 and a blister on his left heel he had already lanced twice, and he was thinking about nothing except how many hours until the light came. Then Pelletier said a word Chase had never heard him say on a radio. Doc. Not Sergeant, not by call sign, just Doc. Pelletier was holding the handset out into the dark with both hands, like it was hot. There's a patch coming through the rear detachment, he said. It's for you. It's a civilian. Chase took the handset. The encryption made the voice sound like it was arriving from underwater, breaking and reassembling, syllables arriving out of order and then correcting themselves. Sir, the voice said, my name is Krista Lucero. I'm a paramedic with Ochiesi County EMS, and I need you to listen to me very carefully, because I don't know how long they're going to let me have this line. Chase heard rain hitting leaves. He heard Hollander wake up. He heard his own pulse in his ears, which almost never happened. Go ahead, he said. Sir, she said, about 90 minutes ago, we pulled your daughter out of a locked chest freezer. There is a thing that happens to a certain kind of man when the worst sentence of his life arrives. The panic does not come first. The list comes first. Chase heard the words and his mouth started asking questions before his chest had finished understanding them. Core temperature, he said. A pause. Papers moving. 91.4 Fahrenheit. Rectal. At first contact. She's up to 94 now, with active rewarming. Mental status. Alert. Shivering hard when we got there, which is good. Answering questions. Oriented to her name, her age, and her teacher. Capillary refill and color. Hands and feet. Another pause, and this time the pause meant the paramedic had just realized who she was talking to. Sir, refill is delayed in both hands. There's frostnip on the left index, middle, and ring fingertips. Waxy white when we arrived, modeled now. Which 3? Chase said. Index, middle, ring, left hand. Chase closed his eyes in a jungle 40 kilometers from the nearest generator and saw his daughter putting her left hand flat against something to push. The 3 fingers you use when you brace against a lid that is heavier than you are, because your thumb is under it and your little finger has slipped. Is there old damage, he said, under the new? Is there anything healed? The silence went on long enough that he knew. There's layering. Krista Lucero said quietly. That's why I'm calling you, and not just filing a report. The new injury is on top of at least 2 older stages. Sir, this did not happen once. Morales had turned around in the mud. Nightingale had his red lens on the map and was not looking at the map. Where is she? Chase said. Gulf Pines Regional, and they'll transfer her to the Children's Hospital in Pensacola tonight. Sir, I have to tell you the rest fast. Her voice dropped, and behind it he could hear a hallway. The freezer was in your garage. It was latched from the outside with a bungee and a carabiner. The garage door was down. The house was empty when we arrived. A neighbor called it in because she heard a kid hitting something. Who was supposed to be with her? Your wife says she was at a work event, and your daughter must have climbed in and gotten stuck playing. A breath. Sir, an 8-year-old cannot latch a carabiner on the outside of a lid she is under. Somewhere in the trees, an animal made a noise like a hinge. Can she talk to me? He said. She asked for you, the paramedic said. That's the other reason I fought 4 people for this line. Hold on. The static changed pitch. And then, arriving in pieces the way everything arrives on a bad encrypted link, came a voice that had no business being in that jungle. Daddy? He had rehearsed being calm for 20 years, and it did not help at all. I'm here, Ruby. Are you far? 40 kilometers past where I'm supposed to be, he said, because she was a girl who wanted the number. That's about 25 miles, and I'm coming. Okay, he heard her swallow. Daddy, it was Mom. Mom and her new boyfriend did this. It wasn't a game. He carried me out there, and Mom did the strap. Her voice went smaller, and the encryption stole a syllable and gave it back. They say Dad died like a coward. They said it at the table. They said you got cold when it counted, and that's why... The line dropped. For 4 seconds, nobody moved. Then Pelletier said, I've got it, stand by, and started working. And Nightingale said, Doc, sit down. And Chase realized he was standing up in the middle of a listening halt with his weapon slung wrong. He sat down. He put his hands on his knees, palms up, the way he told casualties to do when they were about to hyperventilate, and he made himself count backward from 30 in Spanish. At 22, he stopped and said, out loud, to nobody, This isn't the first attempt. What? Said Hollander. 3 stages of healing under the fresh one. That's at least 4 events. He looked up, and she dropped 3 degrees of core tonight, in Florida. Whoever did this got good at it. There'll be a number. There's always a number. Nightingale keyed the radio himself and asked Sight Ember for the company commander, in the tone that gets you a commander at 4 in the morning. Major Keith Bannister had been an enlisted medic before he was an officer, and he had known Chase Marsden for 11 years. He listened to 90 seconds of it without interrupting, and then he said one sentence that Chase would think about for the rest of his life. Sergeant, I need you to understand that I'm not sending you home because you're sad. I'm sending you home because a crime has been reported against a soldier's dependent, and I am obligated. You are the victim's father, and you are also the best cold injury medic in this organization, and I'd like both of those men on an airplane. Put Captain Nightingale on. They walked out. 40 kilometers of triple canopy in the dark, in the rain, with a fever, on a lanced heel. Mireles took Chase's aid bag off him at kilometer 6 and did not give it back. Hollander broke trail. Pelletier walked directly behind Chase for 11 hours, and every hour, on the hour, said the same 4 words. Still going, Doc. Still going. It was the least tactical thing any of them had ever done, and nobody said a word about it. They made Sight Ember at 1740 the next day. Chase had not eaten. His boots came off with skin in them. There was a folding table under a tarp where the team put things that mattered, and on it there was a printed message, flimsy with his name typed at the top, and the sergeant major of the company was standing beside it with the specific expression of a man who has been handed something he does not want to touch. Doc, he said, before you go, somebody's got to explain this to you, and I drew it. Chase picked it up. It was a casualty report, not a notification of a death in his family, a notification of his. Marsden, Chase W., Master Sergeant, status, deceased, circumstance, hostile action, non-recovered remains, date of casualty, 9 days earlier, notification of primary next of kin, complete, notification of secondary next of kin, pending. At the bottom, in the block where a human being has to certify that a human being is gone, there was a name typed in capital letters. Nadeau, Douglas R., Specialist. Chase read it 3 times. The 3rd time he read it the way his father read a package of frozen venison, not for what it said, but for the order the marks were in. 9 days. She had told a hospital tonight that he had died like a coward. She had said it at a table, to a child, as an established fact. You do not build a story like that in an afternoon. Somebody had killed him on paper before anybody tried to kill his daughter in a garage. And the whole reason a chest freezer had made sense to them was that the man who could read a chest freezer was already listed as gone. "Sergeant Major," Chase said, and his voice came out level, which surprised even him. "Who has seen this?" "Rear detachment, your wife, chain of command. Anybody correct it yet?" "We were going to correct it in about an hour, once you were on the bird. It's an obvious error. It'll take a week to unwind, but it's fixable." Chase folded the flimsy in half, and then in half again, and put it in his breast pocket, and for the first time in 9 days, something in him went quiet and cold and useful. "Don't correct it," he said. "You do not get to stay dead by asking nicely." Chase found that out in a plywood room at Site Ember at 9 o'clock that night, arguing with a major over a satellite phone while a generator ran outside. "Say it again," Bannister said, "because what I think I heard is that a man I am legally required to return to the United States wants me to leave a false casualty report standing." "Sir, it isn't false in the way you mean." Chase had a pencil and the back of a ration box, because he thought better on paper. "A casualty report is a document. It was created by a specific person on a specific date, and I want to know why. And the only way I find out is if nobody tells him it failed." "You want to run an operation on your own family?" "No, sir. I want to not warn them." Chase turned the ration box around, though nobody could see it. "My wife told my daughter I was dead. Not missing. Dead. And a coward. At a dinner table. As a fact. More than a week ago. That means she saw a piece of paper before she was ever officially notified. Or she knew one was coming. Somebody handed her a dead husband. People do not hand out dead husbands for free." The line hissed. "There's money," Bannister said. "There's $400,000 of service member group life insurance," Chase said. "There's a $100,000 death gratuity paid inside 72 hours. There's dependency and indemnity compensation, monthly, for her and my daughter until she's 18. There's a survivor annuity. There's my daughter's education benefit, which somebody has to control on her behalf until she's grown." He stopped. "Sir, my daughter is the most valuable thing in that arrangement, and she's the only part of it that can talk. That's why she's in a freezer." Bannister did not say anything for a long time. "I buried a friend to something like this," he said finally. 2019. Widow got walked through her paperwork by a very helpful gentleman, and 18 months later, the widow had nothing, and the gentleman had a boat. Nobody ever charged him because everybody who could testify was grieving and broke and tired. A pause. "How long do you want?" 11 days. "Why 11? "Because the memorial is on the 28th, Chase said. "Rear detachment already has it on a calendar. American Legion Post 219. In my own town, and my wife requested it. A claim on a dead service member has to be signed by the beneficiary, and it will be signed before or at that memorial, because that is when it looks natural. I want to be dead until somebody signs their name. And then I'd like to be at my own funeral, sir." Bannister made a sound that was not a laugh. "Sergeant, I cannot authorize a criminal investigation, but I can decline to correct a report while one is open, and I can be extremely slow. You need a badge to make this real, and I know one." The badge arrived 11 hours later, in the form of a man in a wet polo shirt at the passenger terminal, holding 2 cups of coffee, looking exactly the same as he had in 2014 when he had been a medical sergeant on Chase's own team. "Doc," said Nick Cranmer, "you got fat." "I got federal." Cranmer handed over a coffee. "Defense Criminal Investigative Service. Benefits Fraud, Southeast Field Office. And before you say anything, Bannister didn't call me. Your paperwork called me. Your death generated an automatic flag because the clerk who filed it has filed 4 other non-recovered remains casualties in 22 months, and that is a statistical impossibility for a rear detachment that size." Chase stopped with the cup halfway up. Four. I've had a folder open for 6 weeks with nothing in it but a pattern. Then you walked out of a jungle and became the first one of the 4 who could talk. They flew home on a rotator through Panama City and then a contract jet into Eglin, and the whole way Cranmer laid out the rules like a man reading a checklist, because he was. Chase was not an investigator and would not act like one. He would not contact his wife. He would not go near the house alone. And, Cranmer said this one twice, if Chase ever put a hand on anybody, the entire case became a story about a violent Green Beret, and nobody would ever hear the word freezer again. I'm not going to touch them, Chase said. Everybody says that. Hitting him fixes an afternoon. Chase watched the Gulf come up under the wing, brown at the edges, going green. I've got 11 days. I can do a lot more damage than an afternoon. They landed at 2 in the morning in a warm, wet dark that smelled like his whole childhood. Cranmer had a rental car and a paper bag with a Hawaiian shirt in it, a ball cap, and a pair of drugstore glasses. You look like a divorced golf coach, Cranmer said. It's perfect. Nobody looks twice at a divorced golf coach. They drove into Tully Bend at 3:10. 1,200 people, one blinking light at the corner of Baytree and 3rd, the Legion Hall with its sign already changed, white plastic letters pushed into black felt. In memory Mochi C. Marsden, 28th, 2 p.m., all welcome. Chase looked at it for about 8 seconds. Then they drove down Sabine Street with the headlights off, coasting, and stopped 4 houses short of his own. There were 2 vehicles in his driveway, Jolene's Tahoe, and behind it a white Lexus with a dealer frame and a magnetic decal on the driver's door that Chase read twice through Cranmer's little monocular. Bright Harbor Family Advocacy. We stand with the families of the fallen. The porch light was off. The garage light was on, and the garage door was up about 18 inches, the way you leave it when something inside needs air, and Chase Marsden sat in the passenger seat of a rented Corolla, in a Hawaiian shirt, and looked at a strip of light under his own garage door, where a white chest freezer stood against the wall behind the water heater. Nick, he said, there's a gray box in there, on the wall, left of the water heater, mounted on the stud, about shoulder height. It's got a memory card in it. What's on the card? Every 10 seconds of electricity that garage has used for 3 years, Chase said, including every single time somebody opened that lid. Cranmer went very still. Then he took out a notebook, and for the first time since the terminal he looked less like a tired federal employee and more like a man who has just been handed a weapon. Say that into my recorder, he said. Slowly. Sandhill Children's Hospital in Pensacola has a 4th-floor family lounge with a window that looks down the length of the pediatric ward corridor, and for 6 days, a man in drugstore glasses sat in that lounge with a cold cup of coffee and watched his daughter's door from 90 feet away. He could not go in. A dead man cannot sign a visitor log. So Shannon Marsden went in instead. Shannon was Chase's younger sister, an intensive care nurse at Gulf Pines, blunt, and the only person alive who had ever told Jolene to her face what she thought of her. When Cranmer explained the situation in a parking garage, she listened for 4 minutes, asked 2 questions, and said, "Give me a notebook and tell me what numbers you want." She got them all. Ruby had come in at 91.4 and had been rewarmed slowly, which was correct, over 5 hours. Her left index, middle, and ring fingertips were dusky and blistered at the tips, and the blisters were clear rather than blood-filled, which meant superficial rather than deep, which meant she would keep her fingers. Her toes were fine, which told Chase she had been sitting up, knees to her chest, feet off the metal, because she was smart. And then, on the 3rd day, the hospital brought in a pediatric hand and reconstructive surgeon named Regina Kirkbride, and Regina Kirkbride did the thing that broke the case open. She asked for the nail beds. Cold injury to a fingertip damages the nail matrix, she told Shannon, with Shannon's phone recording on the windowsill, because Chase had asked for exactly this. And the nail keeps growing, so the damage rides out from the cuticle at about 1/10 of a millimeter a day, and you get a ridge, a little transverse valley, and it is dated. Injured once, you get 1 ridge. Injured repeatedly, you get a barcode. 9 ridges. 9 transverse ridges across 3 fingernails of the left hand, spaced unevenly. The oldest grown out almost to the free edge, the newest still a soft dent under the cuticle. Kirkbride measured them with a caliper on a photograph, converted millimeters to days, and produced a list of 9 dates, with a plus or minus of about 4 days each, running from late September to the 17th of that same February. 5 months, 9 times. Chase read the list in the family lounge with a plastic spoon in his hand and did not move for 11 minutes. He was not thinking about Jolene. He was thinking about the fact that in 5 months there had been a Thanksgiving, a Christmas, a school concert, and a video call every Sunday at 4 o'clock, in which his daughter had waved at a phone in a house where this was happening, and she had never once said a word to him, and he was afraid of the reason. The answer arrived by way of a lie on a piece of paper. When the hospital pulled Ruby's outside records, there it was, a note from a family practice in Tully Bend, signed by a physician named Stanley Dunphy, who had been treating Marsden since Chase was in high school. Dated in November. It read, in the flat voice of a man doing a favor, patient presents with recurrent cyanosis and pain of the fingertips, cold-triggered, consistent with primary Raynaud phenomenon. Reassurance provided. Mother counseled. No further workup indicated at this time. That's the whole machine, Cranmer said, when Chase showed him. That note is why nobody ever asked a second question. Teacher notices purple fingers. School nurse calls mom. Mom produces a doctor's note that says her kid's fingers go purple because her kid's fingers go purple. Case closed forever. He's 71, Chase said. He delivered me. He's also got $211,000 of debt and a non-profit board seat he got last April. Cranmer flipped a page. Guess who's non-profit? On day 6, Ruby was moved into a regular room with a window, and she started talking. She talked the way she counted, in specifics, and it was worse than crying. She called it the cold room. She said the first time was a punishment for going into mom's purse, and that mom had said 2 minutes and it was longer. She said the man with the white car was called Mr. Blake, and he was nice in front of people, and that he was the one who carried her out because mom could not lift her anymore, and that he said the same thing every time, in a friendly voice, like a coach. Cool off, kiddo. She said she had learned to sit up on the packages instead of the bottom, and to breathe slow, and that if you cried your face got wet, and then your face got cold, so she had stopped crying in there. She was proud of that, and Shannon had to go stand in the hallway for a minute. And she said the reason she never told her father was the reason Chase had been dreading for 6 days. Mom said if I told you, you'd come home, Ruby said. And if you came home in the middle, they'd make you go back and put you somewhere worse. She said Daddy's job is a favor, and they can take the favor away. She picked at the tape on her hand. And then in the winter, she said it didn't matter anymore, because you were dead. She said you got scared, and you froze, and that's how you died, and that's why I get put in the cold. So I'd learn to not be like you. Chase heard that on a recording, in a rental car, in a hospital parking garage on level 3, and he put his forehead against the steering wheel and stayed there for a while. Then he sat up, wiped his face with the heel of his hand and said, "Play the last part again." Because at the very end of the recording, half asleep, with the lights down, Ruby had said one more thing, and it was the thing that mattered most in the entire case, and she had said it like it was nothing. "Aunt Shannon," she said, "in the cold room, there's a hum. It goes on, then it stops, then it goes on again. It's louder when the lid's just been open." A yawn. The longest one was 406. I counted. Chase sat very still. "Nick," he said. "She timed the compressor." "She what?" She counted the run cycle, out loud, in her head, from inside the box. He was already reaching for the door handle. "Nick, she gave us the duty cycle. She gave us the thing we can match. A freezer with an 8-year-old inside it has to work harder and longer than a freezer with nothing in it but frozen deer. And that difference is on that memory card. And my daughter just told us what it sounded like." Cranmer stared at him. "Get me that garage," Chase said. They got the garage at 3:14 in the morning on the 22nd, and they got it the boring way, which is the only way that survives a courtroom. Chase was on the deed, and Cranmer had a search warrant anyway, signed by a federal magistrate in Pensacola, because Cranmer had been doing this for 9 years and did not believe in shortcuts. A county deputy stood at the end of the driveway. Jolene's Tahoe was gone. She was 300 miles away in Orlando for what Bright Harbor Family Advocacy called a survivor wellness retreat, which was, in fact, the reason they picked that night. The garage smelled like motor oil and old grass clippings, and the specific sweetness of a chest freezer that needs defrosting. Chase stood in front of it for 11 seconds. 19 cubic feet, white, dented on the right corner where he had backed a mower into it in 2019. The bungee cord was gone, taken as evidence a week earlier. But the marks were still there on the lid rim, 4 bright little half-moons in the paint, where a carabiner had been clipped and clipped again. He photographed it. He did not touch it. Then he turned left, and there on the stud beside the water heater was the gray box, exactly where he had screwed it 3 years earlier, blinking its small green light like nothing had ever happened in that room. Chase pulled the memory card with a gloved hand and gave it to Cranmer, and Cranmer sealed it in a bag, initialed it, and had the deputy initial it too. It took a technician in Pensacola 9 hours to image the card and produce a file with 14.5 million rows in it, 10-second samples, 3 years of the electrical load on one 20-amp garage circuit, in watts. Chase spread it out on a motel bedspread with a laptop, a legal pad, and a mechanical pencil, and he did what his father did with a spiral notebook. He read the marks in the order they came. Here is what a chest freezer looks like in numbers, when nothing is happening. It sits at about 4 watts of standby. Every 50 to 70 minutes the compressor kicks on and draws between 140 and 190 watts for 9 to 14 minutes, and then it shuts off. Twice a day the defrost heater fires on a timer, at the same clock time every day, forever. That is the baseline. That is the sound of a machine keeping deer meat cold in a garage in Florida. 14.5 million rows of a thing doing its job. And then, 9 times in 5 months, the shape went wrong. Chase found the first one at 2 in the morning and said a word out loud that he did not usually say. Each of the 9 events began with a gap, a 2 to 4 minute stretch where the load fell to near nothing, which is what an open lid looks like. The thermostat loses the cold air and the compressor is not yet aware. Then came a run, not a 9-minute run, not a 14-minute run. The shortest of the 9 was 241 seconds longer than any baseline cycle in 3 years. The longest ran for 411 seconds beyond normal, continuous, at 191 watts, refusing to shut off, because something inside that box was making heat. Ruby had counted 406. Chase looked at the number 411 on his own laptop screen at 4 in the morning in a motel outside Milton, Florida, and he thought about an 8-year-old girl in the dark, in a metal box, keeping count of a motor so she would have something to hold on to, and getting it right to within 5 seconds, and he had to go stand in the parking lot. When he came back in, he built the graph. 9 events, 9 timestamps to the second. He plotted them against Regina Kirkbride's 9 nail-bed ridges with their 4-day error bars, and every single one of the 9 fell inside the window. 2 independent clocks, one made of a compressor and one made of a child's fingernails, and they agreed 9 times out of 9. And there was one more mark, because there is always one more, when you finally get the right file. 40 minutes before event 4, the garage circuit showed a load Chase had never seen on that line, 211 watts, oscillating, for 6 minutes. "That's a shop vac," Chase said, "and there's no shop vac in my garage. There's one in my shed. Somebody carried it in, ran it 6 minutes, and then that box ran 11 minutes long." He looked up. "Nick, she was sick in there. Somebody cleaned it out before they put her back." Cranmer put his pen down. Meanwhile, they were building the other half. Blake Duvall was 48, and he had done 16 years in the Air Force, 4 of them as a casualty assistance representative, which is the job where you sit in a living room with a folded flag and a binder and help the worst day of somebody's life get organized. He had been very good at it. He had a commendation for it. He got out in 2016 and founded Bright Harbor Family Advocacy, a nonprofit offering free benefits navigation to the families of the fallen. It had a website with a lighthouse on it and 2 employees. It had, in the same suite, 2 other entities, Bright Harbor Legacy Trust and a limited liability company called North Star Survivor Services. The nonprofit found the families. The trust took custody of the money to protect it from probate. The LLC billed the trust for administration at 3% a quarter, plus fees. "Here's the model," Cranmer said, laying it out on the motel table like a hand of cards. He targets high-risk deployments. He gets to the spouse early, sometimes before there's even a casualty, with a free benefits review. He gets a beneficiary designation, a power of attorney, and a trust instrument. When the soldier dies, he controls the $400,000, the gratuity, the annuity, and the kid's education money, and he's conservator of the child's share until majority. And if the soldier doesn't die, then he needs a clerk. Specialist Douglas Nadeau, 29, personnel clerk, rear detachment. Duvall's first cousin's son, author of 5 non-recovered remains casualty reports in 22 months, and a bank account that had received $9,000 in 11 deposits from an entity called North Star. 4 before me, Chase said. 4 before you. 3 got sorted out in a couple of weeks. Confused families, angry congressmen, no charges. 1 didn't. Cranmer put a finger on the second line of a printed list. Sergeant First Class Richard Grimsby, killed in Syria, 2022. That one was real. He's actually dead. Then why is he on your list? Because his daughter isn't. Cranmer turned the page around. Bess Grimsby, 11 years old, died in February of last year, at home, cardiac arrest, and the county medical examiner never opened her. Colleen Grimsby worked the 6 to 2 shift at a laundromat on Highway 85 in Crestview, and Chase met her there at 20 past 6 in the morning, because that was the only hour she had to herself. He did not go in the Hawaiian shirt. Cranmer said no, and then Chase said one sentence, and Cranmer changed his mind. She's going to be asked to dig up her daughter, Chase said. She should hear it from a man in uniform who's also standing there because of his own kid. So he wore the uniform, and he was, technically, a dead man in dress blues sitting on a plastic chair between a folding table and 11 front-load washers. Colleen was 44 and looked older and had the stillness of somebody who had already been through the worst thing and had stopped bracing. She listened to the whole thing without touching her coffee. Then she went to a locker at the back and came back with a shoebox held against her stomach with both arms, the way you carry something that is not really about what is in it. I've had this 2 years, she said. I've showed it to 4 people. They were all very kind. Inside were quarterly statements from Bright Harbor Legacy Trust showing $411,000 going in, and, 3 years later, $62,000 remaining. Administration, custodial, family advocacy retainer, special needs consultation, for a child who did not have special needs. 11 pages of fees. There was a sympathy card with a lighthouse on it. There was a receipt from a marina in Destin, in the trust's name, which Colleen had found in an envelope she was never supposed to see. And there was a phone with a voicemail she had transferred to 3 phones over 2 years so she would never lose it. She played it. It was Duvall, 5 days after Bess died, and his voice was warm and slow and completely reasonable. Colleen, it's Blake. I know you're not thinking about paperwork right now, and you shouldn't be, but I want to get ahead of one thing. With Bess gone, her portion of the trust reverts, and there's some language I'll walk you through. And sweetheart, about the medical examiner. I've talked to them. There's no reason to put that child through anything else. She's at peace. Let her be at peace. The laundromat hummed. Ma'am, Chase said, did Bess ever get cold? Colleen Grimsby looked at him, and her chin went, and she put her hand over her mouth, and when she took it away she said the thing she had never said to any of the 4 kind people. He had a boat. He kept saying he'd take her out on the boat. And that winter, twice, she came home and her toes were gray, and she wouldn't say why, and she started sleeping in her socks and her coat. She was crying without noise. I asked the doctor. He said kids run cold. Which doctor? Down in Tully Bend, old fella, Dunphy. There it was. The exhumation order came through on the 24th, and it went fast because a federal magistrate read Regina Kirkbride's affidavit about nail beds and understood immediately that the same clock runs in toenails. Bess Grimsby had 11 ridges. The examiner who had signed cardiac arrest without an autopsy retired abruptly. The new one found what a cold injury specialist told her to look for, amended the cause of death to hypothermia and the manner to homicide, and Greg Aguilar, an assistant United States attorney with a very flat voice, started writing. But the case still had a hole. They could prove 9 cold events, a lie on a doctor's note, a dead girl and a drained trust. What they could not prove was that Jolene Marsden and Blake Duvall had ever discussed it out loud. together, as a plan. Without that, two defense lawyers would spend a year turning it into a story about an overwhelmed single mother, a well-meaning advocate, and a child with a circulation condition. The hole got filled on the 25th, at 11 at night, in a pharmacy parking lot, by a 22-year-old still in scrubs from her second job. Hallie Thibodeau had been Bright Harbor's intake coordinator for 14 months. She answered the phones, scheduled the home visits, and maintained the call recording system, which existed because Duvall told clients that recording protected them. She had been quietly copying files onto a personal drive for 5 months. Cranmer found her because 3 weeks earlier she had filed an anonymous complaint with the state charity registry, so specific it could only have come from inside. "I should have done this in October," she said, standing between two cars, holding the drive in both hands. "That's when I heard him say the thing about the freezer, and I told myself I misheard it. For 5 months I told myself that." She played it in the car. It was a 9-minute call, recorded by Duvall's own system, on the 2nd of October. For 6 minutes it was nothing, scheduling and small talk. Then Jolene's voice, in the flat board register of a woman who has stopped performing. "She got in my purse again. I put her in the cold room for it." Duvall, easy, amused. "How long?" "Long enough. She's not going to do it again." "That's good parenting, Joe." And then, after some business about a signature page, Jolene said the sentence Greg Aguilar would eventually read aloud to a jury twice. "He's already dead on paper, so can she be a problem after the 28th, or does that get handled?" And Blake Duvall said, in the same warm voice he had used on the Lighthouse voicemail, "Kids get cold, Joe. It's Florida. Nobody in this world believes a cold kid." Hallie Thibodeau sat in the back seat with her hands in her lap and did not look up. Chase Marsden did not say anything for a long moment. Then he turned around in the passenger seat. "Ma'am," he said, "are you willing to wear a recorder into that office on the 27th? She wiped her face with her wrist. "He calls me sweetheart," she said. "Every day, 40 times a day. Yes, I'll wear it." Chase Marsden had spent 20 years learning that the difference between a casualty who lives and one who dies is almost never courage. It is sequence. You do the right things in the right order, and you do not skip a step because you are frightened. So he wrote the last 3 days out on a legal pad like a treatment protocol, gave it to Cranmer and to Greg Aguilar and to a family lawyer named Monica Stillwell, and let them cross things out. Step 1 was Ruby, because everything after this would make the house dangerous. Monica Stillwell got an emergency ex parte order on the 26th placing Ruby with Shannon, sealed, and served on the hospital rather than on Jolene, which is legal and which is the sort of thing you only think of if you have done family law in a small county for 19 years. Ruby was discharged that afternoon into her aunt's car. When Jolene called the ward at 8 that night, she was told to speak to her attorney, and she hung up and called Blake Duvall, and that call was recorded by Duvall's own system, and in it she said, "It doesn't matter. It's 2 days. Just get it signed." Step 2 was the clerk. Cranmer took specialist Douglas Nadeau at 5:20 in the morning in a Waffle House in Crestview, alone, no handcuffs, and put a single sheet of paper on the table between the syrup and the napkins. On it were 5 numbers, the statutory maximums, and at the bottom, circled, the number of years the government would recommend if he signed a cooperation agreement before noon. Nadeau was 29, had a 9-month-old daughter, and had been paid $9,000 total. He cried into a plate of hash browns and then he talked for 6 hours, and what he gave them was the piece Chase had wanted most. Duvall had asked him, in writing, in January, whether a non-recovered remains casualty could be filed on a soldier scheduled to be at a forward site with no communications for more than 10 days. He had picked the deployment. He had shopped for a man to kill on paper, and he had chosen Chase Marsden specifically, because Chase Marsden was going somewhere with no radio. Step 3 was the wire, and the wire was the 27th. Bright Harbor's suite had a conference room with a nautical print, a bowl of wrapped mints, and a box of tissues placed within reach of the client chair, which Hallie Thibodeau said Duvall recentered himself before every appointment. At 10 in the morning, Jolene Marsden sat in that chair in a navy dress and signed a claim for the death benefits of a living man. Chase was in a van 400 feet away with a headset on, and Cranmer had made him promise, twice, out loud, that he would not get out of the van. He listened to his wife of 13 years sign 9 pages. He listened to Duval explain the trust language in his warm coaching voice. He listened to Jolene ask whether the annuity would still come if she remarried. He listened to her laugh at something. And then, at 10:41, as the pen went down on the last page, Jolene Marsden said the sentence that ended her life as she had built it. "There, sign it before somebody warms up." Duval laughed. Actually laughed, a short, comfortable bark of a laugh, the laugh of a man in his own conference room with his own mints. "You're terrible," he said. "I'm serious," she said. 2 more days and it's done, and she can say whatever she wants. Nobody's going to believe a kid over a folded flag. In the van, Chase Marsden took the headset off, set it on the bench beside him, put both hands flat on his knees, palms up, and counted backward from 30 in Spanish. He made it all the way down this time. "That's it," Cranmer said quietly. "That's premeditation. That's conspiracy. That's the child. That's the money. And it's on their own system, in his own building. Doc, we can take them right now. Today. I can put him in irons before lunch." Chase looked out the tinted rear window at a white Lexus in a parking space marked Reserved, Director. "Nick," he said, "how long have you been building this folder?" 6 weeks. And Colleen Grimsby has been carrying a shoebox for 2 years, and 4 kind people told her they were very sorry. Chase turned around. "There are 3 families on your list who never got an answer. There are people in that town who signed a condolence book on a lie, and there is a woman in a laundromat who thinks her daughter died because kids run cold." He coiled the headset cord around his hand, slowly, neatly, the way you coil a cord you are going to need again. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, every one of those people will be sitting in the same room, voluntarily, because my wife invited them. You want to do it at the memorial." "I want it to happen where it happened," Chase said. "That hall is 900 feet from my garage. Half that room has eaten dinner at my table." He looked at Cranmer without any heat in his face at all. "And I want the last thing my wife ever does in front of her neighbors to be the eulogy she wrote for a coward." Aguilar approved it in 40 minutes, on 2 conditions. No civilians would be told in advance except the ones who had to be, and the arrests would happen at the doors and at the coffee urn, quietly, after Chase was inside, with no weapons drawn in a room containing children. Major Keith Bannister flew in that night on his own leave, with a garment bag. "You want the uniform," he said, in the motel parking lot. "Sir, she told my daughter I froze," Chase said. "I'd like her to have to look at the whole thing." Bannister handed it over. Then he stood there in the yellow light of a motel sign and said, 2019. The widow's name was Marion. Nobody ever apologized to her. "Bring her tomorrow, sir." Bannister nodded once and walked to his car. American Legion Post 219 in Tully Bend is a low-block building with a metal roof, a gravel lot, and a window air conditioner that has been losing an argument with Florida since 1994. By 1:40 on the 28th, the gravel lot was full and there were cars up on the grass. 211 people signed the book. The Post had put out the good coffee urn and 11 folding tables with paper cloths, and along the back wall was a table with photographs on it. Chase Marsden, standing in a storage room off the kitchen in dress blues with his hands at his sides, could see that table through a crack in the door. A picture of him at 19 with a shaved head, one of him holding Ruby at 11 months, both of them asleep, and a triangular walnut flag case, empty, with the lid propped open. Also in the room, 11 federal agents in civilian clothes, 3 state investigators, Greg Aguilar in a gray suit, and Nick Cranmer beside the coffee urn with a cup he never drank from. Colleen Grimsby, 3rd row from the back. A woman named Marion, who Major Bannister had driven down from Alabama that morning. Hallie Thibodeau, in the far corner by the fire exit, hands shaking. Regina Kirkbride, with a laptop bag. And Stanley Dunphy, 71, in the 4th row, who had come because not coming would have looked strange. Ruby Marsden was not there. Chase had been immovable about that. She was 90 miles away in Shannon's kitchen with a plate of pancakes at 2 in the afternoon and a laptop. At 2 o'clock, Jolene Marsden walked to the front of the hall in a black dress with a folded piece of paper in her hand, and the room went quiet, and she was magnificent. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about the boat ramp where they met. She let her voice break in the right place and let it recover, and 11 women in the front 2 rows were crying with her. And then she got to the part she had written for herself, and the temperature of the room changed, though most people in it did not understand why yet. "I want to be honest with you," she said, "because Chase would have wanted honest. My husband was not a hero. I know that's not what you say in a room like this." A small, brave laugh. "He was a man who was very good at leaving, and when it came down to it, out there, he got scared. He went cold. He froze when it counted, and that is how he died. And I have spent 9 days trying to forgive a man for being smaller than the story we all told about him." She looked down at her paper. "I've told our daughter the truth, because I won't raise a child on a myth. So, to Chase. Who could not do the one thing he promised? Who went cold?" She raised the little plastic cup of church punch somebody had put on the podium, and a voice from the back of the hall, from the doorway by the kitchen, said, perfectly level, not loud, "Ma'am, you're standing at the wrong casket." 211 people turned around. Master Sergeant Chase Marsden walked up the center aisle of the American Legion Hall in Tully Bend, Florida, in dress blues, 11 days after the United States Army had certified his death, and the sound that came out of that room was not a scream. It was a kind of long, dropping groan, the noise a crowd makes when the floor of a story falls out. Somebody knocked a chair over. A man in the second row said, "Jesus God," out loud. Stanley Dunphy sat down slowly, with his hand on the chair in front of him, and did not get up again for 11 minutes. Jolene Marsden did not scream either. That was the thing people talked about for years afterward. She just stopped, entirely, with the cup still up, and her face did something that everybody in the first 4 rows saw and nobody could quite describe. It was not grief, and it was not shock. It was arithmetic. Chase stopped at the front, 6 feet from her, and did not touch her, and did not raise his voice, because a room that quiet does not need volume. "I was 40 kilometers past the last friendly position," he said. "It took me 11 hours to walk out. I had a fever, and I bled through both boots." He let that sit. "That is the coward you were drinking to." Then he turned to the room. "My name is on that flag case, and it should not be. I need 4 minutes of your time, and then the federal government needs the rest of the afternoon." Behind him, without any drama at all, Regina Kirkbride plugged a laptop into the post's projector, which normally showed bingo numbers, and the wall above the flag case lit up. The first thing on the wall was a line graph, 3 years of a garage circuit, in gray, and 9 red spikes. "This is my garage," Chase said. "Every 10 seconds for 3 years. This gray line is a freezer keeping deer meat cold. These 9 red marks are the 9 times it had to fight something warm." He waited. "The warm thing was my daughter. She's 8. The second slide was a photograph of a fingernail, enormously enlarged, with 9 small arrows on it. Cold hurts the nail before it hurts anything you can see, and the nail keeps growing, so it writes the date down. My daughter has 9 ridges. Dr. Kirkbride dated all 9 off that photograph without ever seeing my graph. The 2 lists came up side by side, dates against dates, 9 for 9. He put his hands behind his back. "My father ran the meat locker behind the hardware store. Some of you knew him. He used to say cold keeps time." Chase's voice did not change at all. "It does. It kept 5 months of time in my little girl's hands while I was gone, and it kept it in a machine on my own wall, and neither one of them can be coached, or bribed, or given a doctor's note." He looked at Dunphy for exactly 2 seconds, and Dunphy looked at the floor. Then Shannon's kitchen came up on the wall, 90 miles away, and there was an 8-year-old girl in a purple sweatshirt sitting at a table with syrup on her chin. "Ruby," he said, "say hello, and then say the number." Ruby leaned in too close to the camera, the way children do. "Hi." She held up her left hand, 3 fingertips wrapped in white. "Daddy, I counted. It was 406. And what was the machine's number, sweetheart?" 411, she said, and then, with enormous seriousness, "So I was 5 off." Chase Marsden had to stop for a second, in front of 211 people, and get himself back. "You were 5 off," he said. "You were closer than the professionals, and you did it in the dark." Nobody in that hall ever forgot the sound the room made then either. Blake Duvall had been moving toward the fire exit since the second slide, in that careful, non-hurrying way, and he got 11 feet before Nick Cranmer stepped away from the coffee urn and said, without raising his voice, "Mr. Duvall, federal agent. Hands where I can see them, sir. There are kids here." His lawyer's move came out of his mouth about 4 seconds later. "Privileged, non-profit, fiduciary, you have no idea what you're touching." And in the corner by the fire exit, a 22-year-old girl in a black cardigan stood up and said, to the whole room, in a voice that cracked twice, "I'm the one who kept the recordings. 14 months of them, and I'm the one he calls sweetheart." The federal case took 14 months, and almost none of it happened in a room with any drama in it at all. That is how these cases actually end. They end in stipulations and spreadsheets, and a prosecutor with a flat voice reading a text message out loud twice. Blake Duvall went to trial because his lawyers told him the government could not connect a garage circuit to a boat slip. Greg Aguilar connected it in 9 days. He was convicted on 11 federal counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 of mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, false statements, and 2 racketeering counts for running Bright Harbor as a continuing enterprise. Then Florida tried him for Bess Grimsby, using an amended death certificate, 11 toenail ridges, and a marina receipt, and a jury took 5 hours to convict him of second-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. The judge, sentencing him, said one sentence that ended up in 3 newspapers. "You did not steal money from the dead. You manufactured the dead, and then you went looking for children who could contradict you." Jolene Marsden pleaded, 11 days before her trial, when her own lawyer played her the October recording in a conference room, and she heard her own voice ask whether her daughter could be handled. 9 counts of aggravated child abuse, 1 per ridge, child torture, conspiracy to defraud the United States. 40 years, no early release on the torture count. Her mother, Tricia, who had babysat on 4 of the 9 dates and had told a school nurse that Ruby was dramatic, took 18 months as an accessory and served 11. Douglas Nadeau got 6 years and cooperated fully. Chase Marsden, in the 3rd row at his sentencing, did not forgive him and did not oppose the deal, because a man who tells the truth in time should get the arithmetic he was promised. Stanley Dunphy surrendered his license, pleaded to falsifying medical records, and got 3 years. He wrote Chase a 4-page letter from custody. Chase read it once, in the driveway, and then put it away, because he had decided early that he was not going to become a man who kept relics. The rest of it mattered more. Marion, the widow from 2019, got a check for $206,000 out of the forfeited assets of North Star Survivor Services, in a conference room with Major Keith Bannister standing behind her chair, and she asked him why it took 7 years, and he told her the truth. Nobody had ever believed a folder without a father in it. Colleen Grimsby got her daughter's name back. That was the phrase she used. Bess Grimsby's death certificate now says hypothermia, manner, homicide, which under Florida law made her a homicide victim, which put her name on a list, which means a state advocate has to call her mother every year, which means somebody in the government is now required to remember an 11-year-old girl forever. Colleen said that was all she had ever wanted. Hallie Thibodeau testified for 2 days and was very good at it. The state hired her 9 months later as an analyst in the Survivor Benefits Fraud Unit, where her whole job is to read trust instruments and find the fee schedule hidden on page 11. She keeps a lighthouse sticker on her monitor, upside down. And Chase Marsden did the thing that surprised everybody, including Cranmer. He did not burn the freezer. Cranmer assumed he would. Half the county would have brought gasoline. Instead, once it was released from evidence, Chase had it hauled to a salvage yard and stood there while a man with a plasma cutter opened it up like a book, cut the lid off, cut the latch rim out, and cut the whole box down to a shallow tray about 18 inches deep. Then he took it back to Tully Bend, drilled the bottom, filled it with dirt, and set it in the gravel by the front door of Post 219 with 11 marigolds in it, which Ruby picked because they were the loudest thing at the garden center. There is a small brass plate on the side. It reads, 9. Cold keeps time. Bess Grimsby, 11. Ruby Marsden, 8. Both of them counted. Somebody listened. He also stopped deploying, which was not a small thing for a man 18 years into a career built on going. He took an instructor slot, teaching cold injury recognition at the medical schoolhouse, and he added one block to the curriculum that nobody had asked for and that the schoolhouse fought him on for 4 months. He teaches it to casualty assistance officers. 2 hours, mandatory, for the people who carry the folded flag into the living room. What a survivor benefits fraud looks like from the inside. What a trust instrument with a 3% quarterly custodial fee means. What to do when a family's helpful gentleman shows up before the casualty officer does. He calls the block the second knock, and he opens it every single time with a photograph of a fingernail. Ruby kept all 3 fingertips. She has a slightly flattened pad on her left middle finger and a nail with a permanent shallow groove down one side, and she is entirely uninterested in hiding either. She is 13 now, and she swims competitively, which her father did not expect and does not fully understand. The counting game got remade. Now, on Sundays, Chase and Ruby time things on purpose. Ridiculous things. How long the ice maker takes to cycle. How long her hair takes to dry on the porch. She keeps it in a composition notebook with a rubber band around it, and on the inside cover, in her handwriting, it says the only thing anybody needed to say about the whole business. Cold keeps time. So do I. There is one more thing, and it is the only piece of the entire affair that Chase Marsden kept for himself. He never had the casualty report expunged. He had it corrected, which is different. The file now contains the original document, the 9 days it stood, and the amendment, all 3 in order, in sequence. The way marks stack up in something frozen. He asked for a certified copy, and it hangs framed in the hallway of a small house on Sabine Street, between a picture of a meat locker and a picture of a girl at a swim meet. People ask about it. He tells them the same thing every time. Some men come home to a parade, he says. I came home to a folder. Best 11 days of my life. So that's the story. And I want to leave you with the part that has been sitting on my chest since I first pulled the thread on it. We think of monsters as loud. We picture somebody kicking a door. But the man in this story never raised his voice once, and his entire business model was politeness. He arrived early, with a binder and a lighthouse on his card, at the exact moment a family was least able to read a document. That is the tell, by the way, and it is worth writing down. Watch for whoever shows up before they were called, offering to organize your grief. Grief is enormously profitable if you can get to it while it is still confused. The second thing is about the kid, and honestly it is the reason I wanted to tell this one at all. Ruby Marsden did not save herself by being brave, or by screaming, or by telling somebody a feeling. She saved herself by counting a motor, 406. And when an adult finally sat still long enough to check her number against a machine, she was off by 5 seconds. She had been handing people evidence for 5 months, and nobody had asked her for a number, because we do not usually take data from 8-year-olds. Take the data. Kids describe the world with terrible words and excellent specifics. And the last thing is about what the father did with his fury, because he had every right to burn that house down, and instead, he spent 11 days doing paperwork. Rage wants an audience. Records want a courtroom. He understood that the only thing his enemies could not survive was being written down accurately, in order, with timestamps, and that he happened to be the one man alive who could read the handwriting. Cold keeps time. So do good notes. So does patience. If this one got you, you know what to do. Thanks for spending it with me. I'll see you in the next one.